We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
All right, well, welcome back to the Right Stuff Matters podcast, where we are pushing the envelope on conversations that matter. Well, we are here, as you know, in the great state of Virginia, all the way in the Loudoun County that is constantly on the news all the time. And today is no different. And actually just fresh off of another Loudoun County School Board meeting. And I am actually glad to have with me a fellow, let's say domestic terrorist, maybe, with me here on the program. We have been labeled as domestic terrorists here in Loudoun County. But Joe is also a fellow veteran of the U.S. Army. Although I have to say, Joe, you were in the Army. I was in the slightly better branch of the U.S. Air Force. So, you know, I mean, we're both veterans, but, you know, how does the saying go that we are every veteran is equal, but some veterans are created more equal than others? Is that something like that?
I don't know. That sounds like a Chair Force thing. I've never actually heard that.
Oh, Chair Force. Wow. Yeah, well, great to have you on the program, Joe Mobley.
Funny, like 10-second story. I actually enlisted in the Air Force and got stolen by the Army for Sergeant Fred Lewis. He took the DD4 pack from the recruiter, Sergeant Bozeman, in Springfield, New Jersey, and brought it to Virginia, and I enlisted in the Virginia Army National Guard. It was nuts.
Oh, that's great. Stolen. Are you sure that they didn't tell you that you would be in a better off in a better, different kind of branch of service? Are you sure that's not how that conversation went?
The pitch was I was prepared. I was dropping out of college to just join the Air Force, and I was still going to be a musician. Most musicians don't even need to finish college if they're actually good. And Fred Lewis, he talked me into not dropping out of college, which I'm glad that I didn't. I met and married my wife, obviously, afterward, and had my Army career. But yeah, he said, well, how many times did you swear in? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, did you raise your hand once or twice? He said, the first one doesn't count. You go back, you swear in again, and then they take you straight to basic. I said, no, I didn't do that. He said, oh, you're fine. You're joining the Army. And I literally did. So I enlisted in the Air Force, rose my hand, did the oath, enlisted into the Air Force, and actually joined the Army. It was nuts.
All right. Well, that's great. And great to have you here on the program, Joe. Joe is also the host of the Joe Mobley Show, in addition to being a veteran and domestic terrorist, along with me, co-conspirator at Loudoun County School Board meetings. But no, I mean, we joke, we kid around about that, but it really is a serious topic, right? I mean, there's been a lot of serious things that have happened here, in particular in Loudoun County. Actually so serious that you thought that it would be good, along with a bunch of other folks, that something more drastic, if you will, needed to happen. And last week, you were actually listed as a, plaintiff in a formal complaint that was declaratory and injunctive relief request that was sent to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. And leading up to this, though, just as a reminder for folks, I mean, there was a letter that was sent by the National Association of School Boards, which is a very large organization, And they sent a letter to the Biden administration essentially saying that there's a series of incidents that have happened. Loudoun County was named among them. January 22nd specifically was named in there. And that a result of all of these different supposed incidents that they labeled as domestic terrorism needed to be investigated. And as a result, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, sent a letter to the Justice Department saying that they should investigate these matters. And that was leading up to this. So in the complaint, specifically, I know your portion, I'll just read it as folks have not actually seen it. Listed you as Joseph Carey Mobley is an African-American veteran, parent of school-age children, resident of Loudoun County, Virginia. He is a taxpayer and his taxes support LCPS. He is an outspoken public critic of LCPS and its promotion of CRT ideology and its adoption of the transgender policy, which we know as 80-40 policy, which we've talked about here on the program. Plaintiff Mobley opposes all forms of racism, including the racism promoted by the CRT ideology, and opposes the transgender policy as it is divisive, false, harmful, and immoral. So I guess, Joe, I mean, what led you to get to this point of saying, hey, we need to actually do something more? We're going to school board meetings. We've got this letter now that's out there. I guess what led to this point?
Well, George Washington in his farewell address, he said many things, but one of the things that he said is the benign influence of good government. We're free citizen, and how the influence of the government on us should be benign. It should be something that doesn't really drastically impact our lives. It doesn't really touch our lives so much. And the easiest parallel is to think an American citizen versus a Chinese citizen, in that a Chinese citizen has a daily interaction with their government at the highest levels. So basically, they're like, I kick it with the government. As an American, I do not. I do not hang out with the government. I don't really kick it with the government. We're not so close that they know the innermost workings of my life and vice versa. That's the proper functioning of the constitutional republic, representative republic, democracy, whatever people want to call it. That is the appropriate manifestation of the United States government. That's what the founders put in place. Benjamin Franklin, a republic, if you can keep it, ma'am, like that's our government. Okay, I know it. I've read it. I've studied it. I think we've got some of the same documents on our walls. Read the Federalists, read the Anti-Federalists. When we have permanent government members, which is, there's the executive branches and the president, but then there are these administrative agencies. And these administrative agencies have extreme power. A lot of people refer to them as the permanent government. We think Dr. Fauci's been in office. He's been in his position for decades. Actually, for my entire life. I'm an 80s baby. Dr. Fauci has been in his position my entire life as a permanent bureaucrat. Well, of course, President Obama, when he was president, those senior executive service members, so you've got your GS scale of employees, government employees that are non-military. On top of them are high-level leaders called senior executive service members, or SES 1, 2, or 3. These are your chiefs of staff, your directors of agencies, and those types of executives. It went from 1,000 when Obama took office to 7,000. So he added 6,000 of these newly minted senior executive service members. What these people do is they impose pseudo laws into our lives. A short barrel rifle, which is a firearm, a rifle that's shorter than, I had the number in my head. Is it 16 inches or 14 inches? But whatever the measurement is for a short barrel rifle, it's not illegal because a law says it's illegal. It's illegal because the ATF decided it's illegal. Or the FBI can impose regulations. The IRS can impose regulations. Well, when the Attorney General of the United States comes on national television and says, I'm going to use the weight of my office, I'm going to use the justice apparatus, the intelligence apparatus, thinking FBI, thinking DOJ, thinking all of the investigative services, and there are a lot. I'm going to use this apparatus to target, to investigate. I don't want to say to spy on, because law enforcement investigatory authority does allow for a certain amount of looking at stuff. I don't want to use the word spy. People are like, oh, he's crazy. But when the Attorney General of the United States says that I'm going to use this nuclear option against parents for the high crime of disagreeing with the government, disagreeing with the school board, disagreeing with people that they elected into office, I've got to come off the bench. I can't abide by that. You know, both of us, we swore this oath. And the oath for most oath takers is not a seasonal thing. It's not a while I'm in this office. Most of the oaths are a lifetime oath. If you look at the oath of enlistment, if you look at the commissioning oath, they're a lifetime oath where you swear to defend the Constitution of the United States and protect the American way of life, the American people from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And you do that whole dance. When I did it, it's something that I took seriously. It's something that I do pledge to do for my entire life. So then the Attorney General, he's on TV, he's saying, hey, I'm targeting parents. Yes, he is targeting me. I am one of those outspoken parents. But even if I wasn't, I'm targeting parents for disagreeing with the government. I get a Chinese vibe. I do not get a benign influence of good government, of the free laws of good government that Washington talked about. I get a Xi Jinping vibe, like, if you disagree with us, then we'll investigate you and put you in prison. And you look at the January 6th rioters, when you look at the insurrectionists, they're still in jail. They're held without bond. They have not been charged. Many of them are in solitary confinement. That's a danger, Will Robinson. Like, okay, the government says that, hey, you disagree with us, and that's illegal now. So here's your jail cell. I couldn't abide by that. That's why we're doing this right now. It's a complaint. It's not a lawsuit. It's injunctive release or injunctive relief, which I like to say to people. It's what you have in your mind as a cease and desist. Please stop doing this, or else there will be repercussions, which in this case is the lawsuit. But I was glad to put myself as a named complainant, a named plaintiff on this. I know there's a group of parents from another state, and I get it. Like, they're in a liberal state as well. Putting your name, your face, your address, this type of identifiable information on a case like this is a very serious decision. But myself and some other people that we know, we were willing to do that. I see it as the least that I can do. I think back to signing the Declaration, which was a death pact. And of course, there's that line that we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Sacred honor comes last on purpose. Like, are we going to be an honorable person or not? Are we going to leave an honorable namesake to our children or not? And I saw this as an opportunity to do that. So that was a really long answer for a short question. But that's why I'm on the case, and that's why I'm going to see it through to the end, no matter what that looks like.
Yeah, well, good on you for doing that. Like you said, you are putting yourself out there, putting your name on a formal document that'll be filed, right? I mean, this lasts forever. This is not something that goes away. I mean, you will be able to look at this in the National Archives decades from now. So it really is.
Yeah.
And you said a couple of things there that are really we could spend hours talking about. A couple of them, though, I mean, you talked about putting your name along with others on this document and pledging our lives and our fortunes that the founding fathers and those who signed the Declaration agreed to. And you remember that, was it Benjamin Franklin that said, we'll all hang together, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, but you also talked about the oath of enlistment or the oath of office. You know, that is an important point that you made, that is a lifetime oath that you're taking to protect and defend the Constitution. And I don't think a lot of people actually think about it that way. I know that in veteran circles that I'm in, when I mention that to people, they seem puzzled by it at first. And after they think about it for a few minutes, I think they start to agree that indeed is a lifetime oath. But most don't. So, I mean, is that the experience that you've had as well? Do people, for the most part, seem shocked by that idea?
Yeah, and just like you mentioned, more so in the veteran circles, because I don't think civilians think about the context of the oath a lot because why would they? The office seeker, the office holder, a lot of those oaths are different and they're nuanced. They all say something about the Constitution, the American way of life, the American people, support and defend. They all have that. Some of the particular office holders, theirs has a faithfully discharge the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter, or something that confines it to the time of the office. The military oath does not. The commissioning oath does not. And you will not find a warrant officer, a commissioned officer, or a non-commissioned officer that is not aware of the fact that the military, the fine print is the Department of Defense can recall you at any time for any reason. That means everyone knows, all of the bean counters, all of the legislators, they know that it is a legal fact, that this is a lifetime binding agreement, that you are pledging service to your nation. That's why you should read your military contract. That DD4 pack that your recruiter has, read it. There's some fine print.
That's right.
There's some stuff about medical information.
That's right. Well, and I don't know about you, but you don't even, when you go through training in the military, they don't give you a pocket constitution and say, here, make sure that you read this, make sure you understand this. They don't teach that as well. So you are swearing to protect and defend something against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think a lot of people forget the domestic part. And some people, I think, don't even know what they are swearing to protect and defend.
We haven't talked about this, but I beat that drum almost daily. I say exactly that. And it disturbs me among the military. When I was in, I think it was 560,000 members of the Army. But even, I think a scarier thought is law enforcement, more so local than federal, where we're talking millions of sworn, conservators of the peace. How can you protect and defend something that you've never read? It's actually impossible. And it's unfortunate, but every atrocity throughout history has been done by the hand of the government, by the military, or by a police state. So no one loves law enforcement and military more than I do, but I am acutely aware that many of them have never read the document. They will not read the document. They don't know what's in it. They don't understand it. They don't know the political theory behind it. And they will commit atrocities under order. Even in a post-Nuremberg trial world, they will, I was just following orders. The governor said to do X, Y, or Z. If I was a deputy and I served in law enforcement, if I were still, exacting the authority of a badge, I could not see a world in which I would go to a church and question the assembly, tell them that they needed to shut down or anything like that. And the confidence to do that, to rebut that as a soldier, as a law enforcement officer, is you have to know the Constitution. You have to say these people have a fundamental right to this, not a right granted by government, but a right protected by government and instituted by nature and nature's God or man's God, however they want to coin it. But you need to know the document and you need to know your duty to protect it on the individual basis. With the churchgoer, with a business patron, with a private property owner. And yeah, we could probably go hours on that, but that's what I got on that. Could.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up another point about the fact that just them being able to come in and just say, hey, we don't like what you're saying. We don't like your opinion. And so therefore we're going to use the power that we have, which really is irresponsible of government to use power that's not vested in them, right? I mean, the Constitution is what binds us, which, I mean, it's really a social contract, right? I mean, it's an agreement that we have had with one another that have said, this is how we're going to live in society together. And so we have not vested that power to just be, in a sense, a dictator and just decide how we're going to use government resources against people. And just the other day, I'm going to play this clip. I don't know if you saw Jim Jordan, representative, on the Hill the other day, questioning the Attorney General about what evidence they had to be putting out a letter to the Justice Department about that. So I'll play this clip.
Of justice programs and the National Security Division. Now, I find that interesting. You said there's no way you're going to be treating parents as domestic terrorists, but you got the National Security Division in a press release regarding your memo that day.
My memo does not mention the National Security Division. It's addressed to
I didn't say it did. I said the press release accompanying your memo that day from the Department of Justice, right here it is,
I'm going to be as clear
talks
as
about
I
the
can
National
be.
Security
This
Division
is
being
not-
part of this effort.
I want to be clear as I can be. This is not about what happens inside school board meetings. It's only about threats of violence and violence aimed at school officials, school employees, and teachers.
First sentence
We
of your
respect
memo,
the
very
First
first
Amendment.
sentence, you said, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
When did you first review the data showing this so-called disturbing uptick?
So I read the letter, and we have been seeing over time threats.
Whoa. I didn't ask you. So you read the letter, that's your source?
So let me be clear. This is not a prosecution or an
Is there some
investigation.
study, some effort, some investigation someone did that said there's been a disturbing uptick, or you just take the words of the National School Board Association?
When the National School Board Association, which represents thousands of school boards and school board members, says that there are these kind of threats, when we read in the newspapers reports of threats of violence, when that is in the context of threats of violence
The
against
source
all-
for this, for the very first line in your memo.
Time of the gentleman has
disturbing spike
expired.
Was the School
The
Board
time of the gentleman has
Association
been
letter.
expired, Mr. Deutsch.
What do you think, Joe? I mean, he's saying that the only evidence that they have for sending a letter is news reports, so news media, and a letter from the National School Board Association.
I love watching Merrick Garland squirm under his own doing. We see the same thing when he's being questioned about, the sexual assault crimes here in Loudoun County. And it's like, well, you and Dr. Ziegler are pen pals now. But when we ask you about crimes, then you're like, oh, I have no knowledge of it. That's a state case. You're all up in the state's business. But here's where the rubber meets the road. And I really wish that they got to in this particular hearing, and especially in this particular clip. This is how you know that Merrick Garland is full of it. This is how you know that the federal government's full of it, that it's a power grab, that they want to do some type of injustice. On TV, the feds come in and they save the day and they steal the case. The FBI goes to the patrol officer and says, we're taking over. That does not happen in real life. In real life, there's a thing called principal jurisdiction where, like kidnappings, a bona fide, verified kidnapping, the FBI has principal jurisdiction. Everyone knows that they do. You cannot handle the case live. You call the FBI. HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, they've got principal jurisdiction for human trafficking. So everyone knows, hey, this is their case. DA, ATF, it's in the names of their agencies. So law enforcement works with them very openly, and they often invite them into cases for increased resources, maybe for an outsider opinion or whatever. Law enforcement does this. Mike Chapman, the sheriff here in Loudoun County, would do this kind of thing. A very capable leader. Well, here's the thing. When they look at everything that Merrick Garland says, when local law enforcement says, oh, well, hey, we can arrest people for threats. We can prosecute people if they're threatening violence, if they're conspiring. And in Virginia in particular, you need a furtherance of the act. So they would actually need to set their plan into motion. But in most states, you do not need a furtherance of the act. You just need the conspiracy to commit X, Y, or Z. So for, say, Anywhere USA, for their police chief to say, oh, hey, send us the threats and we can investigate and prosecute. The Justice Department and the AG's office says, no, we're not sending you that stuff, but they don't have that stuff. There are no threats. If there was an uptick in threats right now, if I'm just like, Michael, I'm going to come to your house and kill you, you can use that with law enforcement. You can send the clip to them and say, hey, Joe Mobley is threatening violence, and they will come and they'll take me away immediately, and then they will interview me. They don't call them interrogations anymore, but they will interview me. That's not happening because there is no uptick in threats. You always verify your source. You can't be like, oh, well, it's the National School Board Association, and they know a lot about prosecuting crimes, and they know a lot about collecting evidence, and they don't know anything about anything in the criminal justice apparatus. So he was really squirming. I almost wish that they had in the hearing that they were equipped with some better questions about the particulars of the criminal justice apparatus, because I would have liked to ask him some really hard questions to see him try and weasel out of it. But there are no threats. None of us at the Loudoun County School Boards, none of us are threatening the school board. That's a total lie. And if we were threatening them in public fashion on national television or in text or emails or social media posts, law enforcement would be made aware and they would come to our homes, take us away, and interview us.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, really, we are doing something that is within the confines of the law, right? I mean, there is a process. They have created a public comment section within the school board, and we are able to sign up and go and speak, albeit for our one little measly minute that they give us to speak. But we're doing something that's within the constraints of the law and what we're allowed to go and do. And like you said, we're not actually issuing any sort of threats. We're just demanding some sort of action be done. But nobody that I've ever seen, in all the times that I've gone to school board meetings, have I seen anybody try to threaten the school board officials or any elected official or anyone for that matter. There's disagreements, and sometimes very sharp disagreements. But it seems like that's where we're heading, is that if you have a sharp disagreement, that somehow that's now translated into domestic terrorism for some reason.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've been paving the way to this with the whole hate speech thing. Like, you saying things that hurt our feelings or that we don't like or disagree with is hate speech, then it naturally follows that you disagreeing about policy points that we hold is criminal. It's terrorism. It's treason. It's high crime. And that this merits a federal task force. Yeah, it's insane.
Right in the middle of when we have lots of things going on around the country, we have crime rates that are just skyrocketing. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but anybody that's watching anything on the local news in particular, but also at the national news level, I mean, there is an uptick in crime all over the place in a lot of the major metropolitan areas, Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta, all those different major cities are ridden with crime, and it's upticking, along with other things that are going on our southern border. And it seems like you would have a lot more important things to worry about than a letter that says that there are threats. No actual evidence of a threat, but just speculation, it seems, for the most part. One of the things that I thought was interesting in this filing is that She Van Fleet, who is also a local Loudoun County resident that you and I both know, she has come and spoken at school board meetings. She spoke at other venues and things, as you have. I think she was at CPAC even. And what's fascinating is that in this complaint, she talks about the comparison, and she's talked about this in other places too, between what's going on in this country and what has happened previously in Mao's Cultural Revolution, and that the same tactics that were used then to create division amongst people are being used here. So it really is, we're not making this up. I mean, history is in a lot of ways repeating itself. And what's fascinating is that it seems people can't see the similarities between that. And why is that? Why can people not look and see what has happened in history and recognize that this is happening here? This is happening now.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's being kept from them. Not even the finer points of history, but even the broad points of history. Dennis Prager talks about this all the time when he talks about speaking with young people and asking them, you've heard that communism is bad, but do you know why? And most of them say, well, communism caused these famines and all these people died of famine. That's not the finer points of what actually happened. It wasn't that there wasn't food. It was that the government fumbled so poorly that millions of people starved and blah, blah, blah. What's really going on is exactly like She Van Fleet says, there is a Marxist playbook We've seen this before. Those of us that are students of history, we know what they're going to do next. We know what they're going to say next. We know how they're going to rebut arguments because it is extremely prescriptive. And I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking about radical progressives. There's a playbook, and they stick to it. So one of the things that you have to do to exact, you could say communism, socialism, whatever, it's Marxism. It's a rose by any other name. It's all the same thing. You can go straight to the manifesto for, is you have to cause division, and you figure out what it is the divisive point of this society. And you take that thread and you pull it, just like you're pulling from a tapestry or pulling a thread in a sweater, and it's got to be the right one. I think the left is making a mistake. I think they're making a tactical error. It's a new variable. It's a deviation from tried and true Marxist ideology, in that the left has new shiny object syndrome, and they're like, the thread to pull on in the United States is race. Like, we know that because of our history with slavery, even though there were 3.5 million slaves in the triangle slave trade, which means Africa and, two other locations. The United States was one, sometimes Europe, sometimes South America. We had 330,000 slaves out of 3.5 million. That means that there were a lot that went somewhere else. Brazil had over 1 million. Brazil had the lion's share of slaves in the triangle slave trade. There were slaves all over Europe. There were slaves all over North and South and Central America. But we get branded the terrible racist, blah, 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 because that's the thread to pull. That's the way to divide Americans. You'll see that they're not having this race debate in Venezuela and Brazil and Argentina and all these other places where they had slaves. Where they were Aztecs and Mayans, where they were slaughtering 84,000 people in a 4-day weekend. They're not having the race debate, because there it's class, it's producers versus non-producers, haves versus have-nots, which we saw with the bourgeoisie, which we saw with the Gulag Archipelago. It's a different societal thread. I think the left is messing up tactically because they need to keep pulling for them to get their Marxist takeover. They need to keep pulling the racial thread, the Al Sharpton, the race baiting thread. But they go, ooh, LGBTQ, ooh, intersectionality, ooh, gender dysphoria, ooh, this, that. And so they're kind of conflating issues, and that's where they're actually losing support. Fight for Schools, Glenn Youngkin as the Republican candidate for governor of Virginia. A lot of these groups and political candidates are getting support from more or less outsiders, because as the issues crash into each other, people are like, well, I'm for racial justice, but am I for social justice? Am I for gender justice? Am I for am I for all of this other stuff? And the left is throwing too many things in the pot. And I think they're starting to come apart at the seams. We see this with Dave Chappelle and his whole thing. We see this with prominent athletes and superstars that are like, let's not outlaw thinking. They're putting too much stuff in the pot. And I hope they keep screwing it up. If they keep pulling on the race thread, then we'll head towards Marxism. But I hope they keep throwing everything in the pot, because it red pills people. It really does.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point. And I think that probably the reason why they keep throwing some of these things in here is to continue to create the division that you're talking about, right? I mean, because it seems like we've had so much divisiveness over the past year and a half, right? First it was with COVID, and then it was, wear masks versus not wearing masks. And then it was social distancing versus not social distancing. And then it's now become vaccine versus not vaccine. And then it was divisive on
I thought I had a mask.
And intersectionality. I mean, so it's continuing to add things. And right, I mean, there's people that sit there and look, and you're like, man, what's the next big divisive thing that I'm gonna all of a sudden lose half my friends over, or my family members over, right? And I mean, people are gonna really feel that, I think, when we get up to the holidays here soon, when, things have become so divisive, and people become, I think, more and more isolated in their ideas because of all of these different topics. And you've even seen that in the church as well, where the church is becoming very divisive within itself with critical race theory and intersectionality, part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the divisiveness that has been created there over things like CRT and intersectionality is just massive. And in fact, you've brought up some of those previous incidents of creating this kind of divisiveness, and I thought it was interesting. I was going to play one other clip here. This was Vladimir Putin. So Putin talking about things that are going on here in America. I don't think we're getting the audio.
Opinions different from their own. And I think this should remind you of something that is happening. And we see what is happening in the Western countries. It is with puzzlement that we see the practices Russia used to have and that we left behind in distant past. The fight for equality and against discrimination turns into an aggressive dogmatism on the brink of absurdity when great authors of the past, such as Shakespeare, are no longer taught in schools and universities because they are announced as backward classics that did not understand the importance of gender or race. In Hollywood, there are leaflets reminding what you should do in the cinema, in the films, how many personalities and actors you've got, what kind of color, what sex, and sometimes it's even tighter and stricter than what the Department of Propaganda of the Soviet Communist Party Central Committee did. And the fight against racism, which is a lofty goal, turns into new culture, cancel culture, and into reverse discrimination, racism on the obverse. And it brings people apart, whereas the true fighters for civic rights, they were trying to eliminate those differences. I asked my colleagues to fight this quote from Martin Luther King, and he said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." That is a true value. But
So that's the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, comparing things that are happening here in the West to things that happened in Russia, even saying that things were tighter and stricter than the Department of Propaganda in that country. I mean, he goes on longer, and obviously we're hearing that through the translator, not through his direct words. But he even goes on later and says that there are some monstrous things when from a very young age you teach your children that the boy can easily become a girl and impose them on this selection, this choice. You push the parents aside and make the child take this decision that can destroy their lives. So this is a man who's in Russia. And you've got him talking about this and seeing this. You've got Kai Van Fleet saying these things. But yet we're doing it here. In America, and people don't see it. That just, I don't understand that.
I thought that was really funny. I did not know about the former, I'm guessing, USSR, Soviet Union, what, Ministry of Propaganda or whatever, but a hat tip from Russia's literal president on how crazy and overbearing the government is here is pretty funny. I think of it like this. I didn't read the books. I watched the movies, The Hunger Games. There are the districts. It's very dystopian. Everything's kind of falling apart at the seams. We like to think of that as other countries or whatever. The United States is the top dog. But if we were to stay in that analogy, the United States citizens, like the citizenry here, are the people in the Capitol in the Hunger Games with the crazy hair and the crazy outfits, literally the crazy hair and crazy outfits, completely detached from reality, living in their own little world. And there's a mounting, a real insurrection, a real forcible change coming, and we're all ha ha ha, everything is great. Oh, wonderful purple hair. Oh, is that a new shade of whatever? And it's just nuts. And it's so nuts because I grew up believing, the United States is the greatest country on earth, the greatest country in the history of the world. And the potential for that is true. We are the freest country in the world, the freest country in the history of the world. And this is still the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, period, regardless of race, gender, sexual identity, orientation, whatever you want to call it. This is where everyone comes. Give us your tired, you're broken. This is it. This is the pinnacle of living on earth thus far, outside of the garden. And we are in the Hunger Games capital with the crazy hair, the crazy outfits. Boys can become girls, girls can become boys. At one point, it was 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, or doesn't equal 4, it equals 5, or something else, because hard math is racist. We're coming apart at the seams. Dimas Christophe is a regular on my show, and he talks about his experience as a Iranian Christian, so a Christian living in Iran, but his experience in the public school system was real persecution. But even they knew, their oppressive government knew, that it was too much to indoctrinate the children. It wasn't permissible in Iran. But here, we're indoctrinating children, and the rest of the world can see it as plain as day. Are you kidding? This equity bullcrap? Go anywhere else. Half of the nations in the world will execute you for some of this crazy gender stuff, especially all of those nations in Asia around the middle. We call that area the Middle East. Bring all your gender ideological bullcrap over there and see how it works for you. But the rest of the world, they see us falling apart. And at first they were watching and eating their popcorn. But for Vladimir Putin to even say that is concerning. Things are pretty bad. And as Ben Carson says, the world is a safer place. The world is a better place. The world is a more free and just and prosperous place when the United States plays its leadership role. And when we don't, things are bad for everyone. I don't know what needs to change, but something needs to change soon, or things will get worse and worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And good words from Ben Carson as well. He says a lot of wise things, and that certainly is wise as well. So just to wrap up on this complaint that you guys filed, the NSBA, the National School Board Association, actually came out with a letter apologizing. They said that, quote, on behalf of the NSBA, we regret and apologize for the letter. That was the letter that they sent to the president. So is this satisfactory? Does that solve all the problems? They issued an apology, and now we can just go?
No, that means nothing. The National School Board Association doesn't have a criminal justice apparatus. They don't have federal investigators. They don't have access to Five Eyes or to the National Security Advisory Committee. They don't have access to any of the things that are invasive in my or your lives. And one, my kids are homeschooled. I could give two craps about the National School Board Association or most associations. I think that they're all frankly ridiculous. And they run exactly counter to the Founding Fathers' vision of America, which is things handled at the lowest level. That's like a basic tenet of the military, a basic tenet of a successful company is you don't go into the boss's office and say, we got a problem. No, you, the employee, have a problem. Solve it. That's what you're paid for. So the federal government is not the arbiter of truth, and they are not Mr. or Mrs. Fix-It. We are supposed to handle our business at the lowest level. So I care much more about not even the governor of Virginia, but about the Loudoun County School Board, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, because they are, Jesus is Lord over all, but the people who kind of lord over your little life here is your local government. So, I don't even know where the National School Board Association is based out of. I don't know who their president is. If they have a board of directors, I care about them 0%. But I do care when the Attorney General of the United States is targeting parents, to include myself and my family. And I do care when the weight, authority, and the tremendous intelligence capabilities of the United States government are pointed at us. Isn't this what we ridiculed George Bush for with the PRISM thing and NSA Gate? And that was back when Democrats were Rage Against the Machine. And now Joe Biden's saying we the people means the government. So I'm confused. I keep up with this stuff, and I'm confused.
That's right. Well, and if you hadn't heard, there was a article that came out of the New York Post today. The individual who actually penned that letter that the NSBA actually sent to the Biden administration apparently has been named as an individual in the administration. So she is moving up to the White House after that letter was sent. She is now going to be on the National Assessment Governing Board of the Education Department. So there you have it.
Wonderful. They do fail up tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to keep monitoring this. We're going to keep up on all that's going on, and obviously you and I are both here in Loudoun County, so we can't get away from it. And obviously we have a responsibility to go and continue trying to make progress on this. So thanks, Joe, for coming on the program. We really appreciate that. People can find you at your podcast, The Joe Mobley Show. You can also find you on Twitter at The Joe Mobley, right?
Yeah, I believe I'm on most platforms as at The Joe Mobley.
Okay. So go check out Joe Mobley. Check out his podcast. I think you do a program. Do you do it every week, or what's the frequency that you're on, or just kind of whenever you get a chance to?
So it's The Joe Mobley Show. It's available on most social platforms. I'm finally to the point where if you type in Joe Mobley into Google or Brave or DuckDuckGo, whatever you got, I actually show up all over the first page. But it's Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour-long show. Where we usually take chat if we're able, but otherwise it's just me and a guest or me and a friend and a guest. And we're talking about the passions of the day. So it's a good time. And hopefully we're encouraging people to come out of the conservative closet, which means being willing to share your thoughts, your opinions, and your beliefs, no matter the circumstance or the potential consequence, because that's what's needed to live in a free society. So I can't thank you enough for having me, man. This was a good time. We got to get out of the cold, standing out there at the school board meeting.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks, Joe. Appreciate you being on the program, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon, sometime in the near future.
Awesome. Let's do it, brother.
All right. That's Joe Mobley. Make sure you go check him out on all the different platforms. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back. All right, folks. That was Joe Mobley in our first segment. Always good to have Joe. You know, I wanted to point out that he kind of said this at the end, but we're just regular, everyday citizens. We aren't paid to go to school board meetings and speak out. We're not paid to do any of this. In fact, today at the school board meeting, right before that, I was actually in a conference call. So we're talking about everyday citizens. We're just going out there and holding the government accountable for the things that they said that they would do. And when they do things that we don't really like, things that we think are outside of their authority, or things that they do that are just wrong in a lot of cases, and a lot of things that we've seen, policies that are being passed and enforced that really are unsafe for our kids in the school, we go to these things. We write letters to our legislatures because, remember, our government is formed as we the people. And as we talked about last time, and if you haven't listened to the last podcast, go back and listen to the last episode where I talk about the social contract that the Constitution formed, this agreement between each of us as citizens of this country have decided this is how we're going to live together as citizens. So go out there, get involved, have conversations, and if you disagree with one another, that's okay. But have the conversation, have the discussion. And as always, obviously be respectful and courteous in that conversation. All right. We're going to go into something next. Climate change is going to destroy the world. That's at least according to some people. All right. One of them in particular, you've heard before, is by the name of Greta. And she's spoken in multiple different places. I think she's, 16 years old, 17, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember how old she is. She was famous for saying it was at some event over in Europe, can't remember exactly what it was, but she said this.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So that was Greta, and someone else had a response to Greta recently.
All the school kids going on strike for climate change, you're the first generation who've required air conditioning in every classroom. You want TV in every room, and your classes are all computerised. You spend all day and night on electronic devices. More than ever, you don't walk or ride bikes to school, but you arrive in caravans of private cars that choke suburban roads and worsen rush hour traffic. You're the biggest consumers of manufactured goods ever, and update perfectly good, expensive luxury items to stay trendy. Your entertainment comes from electric devices. Furthermore, the people driving your protests are the same people who insist on artificially inflating the population growth through immigration, which increases the need for energy, manufacturing and transport. The more people we have, the more forest and bushland we clear, the more of the environment that's destroyed. How about this? Tell your teachers to switch off the aircon. Walk or ride to school. Switch off your devices and read a book. Make a sandwich instead of buying manufactured fast food. No, none of this will happen because, the piece says, you're selfish, badly educated, virtue-signalling little turds inspired by the adults around you who crave a feeling of having a noble cause while they indulge themselves in Western luxury and unprecedented quality of life. Wake up, grow up, and shut up.
Okay. Well, if you didn't know what his opinion was, I think you got it now. Look, I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. I mean, he's right. You're talking about students who are going out in protest, but yet demand to have all of these things, right? I mean, you go to some event that is about environmentalism, and look at what happens afterwards. Just go and look, right? The day after one of these big environmentalist type events happen, and you will see all kinds of trash all over the place. Water bottles all over, garbage, wrappers, now masks, all over the place. Be consistent. I mean, it's fine if you're going to have the opinion that you need to, save the planet because it's going to be destroyed in a couple of years and we're going to be completely flooded and we're not going to be able to even survive and live, or it'll burn up, or whatever it is that they say that is going to happen. Fine. If you want to have that opinion because you think that the data supports that, but be consistent. And that's all that he's saying is let's be consistent. But he's saying it in a slightly humorous way, which I think is needed. Humor can be beneficial. So we're going to go next to a little more serious topic, kind of continue on. Earlier during the time with Joe Mobley, I had mentioned, or I played a clip rather, Representative Jim Jordan. And in that same hearing, he actually said a couple more things that I think are worth talking about. And that is, he mentioned the types of fear that he said people are feeling right now, particularly people in his district, but in all different types of places, that they are fearful right now of their government.
Mr. Chairman, Americans are afraid. For the first time during my years in public office, first time, I talked to the good folks I get the privilege of representing in the 4th District of Ohio, folks all around the country. They tell me for the first time they fear their government. And frankly, I think it's obvious why. Every single liberty we enjoy under the First Amendment has been assaulted over the last year. Stop and think about it. Americans were told you couldn't go to church, couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school. Small business owners were told you're not an essential business, close your doors, causing many of them to go bankrupt. We were given curfews, stay-at-home orders. Last fall in Ohio, you had to be in your home at 10. In Pennsylvania, when you were in your home, you had to wear a mask. In Vermont, when you were in your home, you didn't have to wear a mask because you weren't allowed to have friends and family over. And of course, there's always a double standard with these folks. Folks who make the rules never seem to follow them. And now the Biden administration says get a vaccine or lose your job. Even if you've had COVID and have natural immunity, get a vaccine or you will lose your job. Oh, I almost forgot. The Biden administration also wants another dedicated line of communication for reporting. They want a second snitch line. They want banks to report on every single transaction over $600 for every single American to the IRS. The IRS, that agency with its stellar record of customer service, the IRS, the same IRS that targeted conservatives the last time Joe Biden was in the executive branch. Jefferson said once, tyranny is when the people fear the government. We're there. Sadly, we are there. But I don't think the good people of this great country are going to cower and hide. I think your memo, Mr. Attorney General, was the last straw. I think it was the catalyst for a great awakening that is just getting started. Pilots at Southwest Airlines, the Chicago Police Union, parents at school board meetings, Americans are pushing back because Americans value freedom. A few weeks ago, A few weeks ago, Terry McAuliffe said this: I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach. When government tells parents we're smarter than you, Americans aren't going to tolerate it. When the Attorney General of the United States sets up a snitch line on parents, Americans aren't going to tolerate it. I think they're going to stand up to this accelerated march to communism that we now see. America's going to fight the good fight. They're going to finish the course. They're going to keep the faith because Americans value freedom.
All right, that was Representative Jim Jordan. Some really good words of wisdom there. I mean, he's talking about what's going on right now in this country. You really do have people who are concerned, and it's legitimate concerns. Concerns about their freedoms being taken away. The ability for people to be able to feed their families, to be able to earn a living. And that's being taken away. And as we talked about earlier, when government's able to just come in and just say, well, we don't like what you're saying, we don't like that you don't like our policies, and so we're going to use our capabilities to come after you. You know, that's why it's important what's going on right now, and to pay attention to what's going on right now. To know your Constitution, to understand what it says that government can and cannot do, right? I mean, that's actually the more important thing, is what it cannot do. And again, as Christians, I think that we have a responsibility. We have a duty to hold people accountable for that which they agreed to. That's what we mean by integrity, is holding people accountable for the things that they say they would do. I mean, if you're not doing this in your church, for example, I guess a lot of churches maybe don't have discipleship like we used to, but some do. And if you're in a place like that where you have that context of discipleship, for example, you hold each other accountable, right? That's the whole point of this. You would hold one another accountable, or even, let's just say, not even in a church, let's talk about even in a company. You would hold people accountable for the policies that are put in place. It's not any different here. We're talking about holding people accountable for things. And I think that what Mr. Jordan said is absolutely true, that there are people who are scared right now. There are people who are legitimately concerned about what may happen tomorrow, or a week from now, a month from now, next year, because of the things that are happening. A lot of uncertainty right now. A lot of uncertainty. And everything is starting to show that uncertainty and that feeling amongst people. You're starting to see the prices of things go up. You're continuing to see what's going on in the ports, which is going to create even more supply chain issues. I was encouraged that the governor of Florida actually came out and said, hey, California, if you can't make things work here, you can always come to Florida. We're completely open. So the other thing that I thought was interesting that came out of Florida, I think it was today, where they compared Florida versus the rest of the nation. It was a little infograph that was sent out, and it essentially showed the growth of jobs there in Florida. And I think it almost made me want to move to Florida at this point. I mean, it's almost winter here. I hate the cold anyway. For anybody that knows me, I absolutely hate the cold. So Florida's actually sounding like a really good place right now on multiple fronts. But what was interesting about the little flyer that came out of this infograph, I guess you would call it, is that it didn't say the Florida administration, right? The Florida governors, the executive branch of the state of Florida, created this many jobs. It says 84,500 total jobs were created in Florida in September of 2021. By the way, that's 84,000 jobs created in 1 month in the state of Florida versus the rest of the nation, which is drastically below that. But he didn't say that I created jobs. This was put out, by DeSantis on his, I think, Twitter page. So I'm not sure where it originated. I guess some sort of whatever labor department or whatnot they have in the state of Florida. But regardless, he didn't say this is how many jobs I created. But what do you continually hear with a lot of administrations at the federal level, at the presidents? What do they say? Oh, I created this many jobs. Look how many jobs I created. Government doesn't create jobs, because government may bring in taxes, but they don't make anything. They don't produce anything like a business does. They're not making jobs. They may create positions, but they're using somebody else's money to fund that position. So they don't make anything. And I think it's telling there when you actually have the state of Florida come out and say, Florida created this many jobs. Who created it? Businesses, organizations, companies. That's who created jobs. Well, we're about out of time tonight, but we will talk more about the economy over the next couple of weeks. We've got a lot of things that are changing constantly in the economy right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means for us and what you should do about it. But we are out of time for tonight. Unfortunately, this time goes by really fast, and it was great to have Joe Mobley on the program. Like I said again, make sure that you go check out his website. Make sure you go check out his podcast, and go follow him on Twitter. And that'll wrap us up for tonight. We'll also make sure that you send in questions. We're going to be here every Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m., unless we tell you otherwise. We will be here. So if you have questions, you have things that you want us to talk about on the program, maybe somebody you want to have on the program even, send us an email, send us a comment, maybe, on one of our Facebook posts, and we'll try to get to that. Until next time, have a good night, and make sure that you push the envelope on conversations that matter, because that's what we do here.